Hello, everyone. Today, we'll be discussing a few evaluative points related to the study that was conducted by Fagen et al. This study was conducted in 2014 in Nepal. Now, when we speak about the significance of these evaluative questions or these evaluative points, in our CIs in paper one, we typically get a 10-mark question. We get a 10-mark question. Remember, paper one is of 60 marks. In that 60-mark paper, we get a 10-mark question that asks us to evaluate a particular study. So for instance, if we're getting that question on this particular study, it might be something like evaluate the study by Fagen et al. Or Fagen et al. Elephant learning in terms of two strengths and two weaknesses. At least one of your evaluative points must be about this is the named issue. You may refer to this as the named issue, or you may refer to this as the evaluative issue. So if you understand this question well, we are getting a 10-mark question that is expecting us to evaluate a study. Evaluate it in terms of what? Evaluate it in terms of two strengths and two weaknesses, right? There are two strengths and two weaknesses that are expected from us. However, the examiner is compelling us to evaluate this particular study by the usage of one particular strength or weakness that the researcher might himself or herself add on to this. For instance, this question could be like, evaluate the study by Fagen et al. In terms of two strengths and two weaknesses. At least one of their evaluative points must be about, let's say, quantitative data. Quantitative data. So this is how this question could be like. So if you're getting this question on any other study, they'd name they'd instead of this being Fagen et al., it would be, let's just say, by Bendura et al. It could be by Pozzolo et al. It could be by evaluate the study by Baron Cohen et al. So on and so forth. So getting back to this, evaluate the study by Fagen et al. In terms of two strengths and two weaknesses. At least one of your evaluative point must be about quantitative data. Now, for this particular question, I'd like to get myself some space over here to be able to explain this to you. You're right. Now, for this question, you are not expected to give an introduction. So let me be clear. We do not need any introduction here. No introduction. No procedure whatsoever. Why no introduction? Because we do not have enough of space. We do not have enough of time either. Why no procedure? Because they're not asking you to write down about the procedure. They're asking you to evaluate, right? You are expected to give 4 evaluations, 2 of them in terms of strength and 2 of them in terms of weaknesses. So 4 evaluative points that are expected from you. That is 2 strengths and 2 limitations or 2 weaknesses. Let's just say these 2 are strengths, these 2 are weaknesses. Now, many students, they end up asking this question, do we always have to write down a strength and a weakness and a weakness? Not necessarily, it's on your discretion. You might as well write down a strength, weakness, a strength, weakness. You might as well write down a weakness, and a strength, strength. There's no hard and fast rule, none at least that has been prescribed by the CI. So we do not need any introduction. We do not need any conclusion. No wasting time. Get start with the strengths and weaknesses. Now, for every particular strength or weakness, there are 3 things that I'd want you all to keep in mind. Number 1, identify that point, identify that particular strength or weakness, right? In this case, in the question that I showed you last, that was about, I think we wrote quantitative data, right? So that's the point that's already identified. Nonetheless, see, there's one point that you've been given by the examiner. The other 3 points, they have to come from your own. So it's pretty important that you prepare for this question really well. How do you prepare for this question? Write down generic answers for all of the 12 studies. Prepare them beforehand, right? So because there's this one point that you'd be given by the examiner, and the other 3, they are on totally your discretion. This is on your discretion. So the ball is in your court, right? 75% of the answer comes from what you want to write. 25% of the answer comes from what the examiner wants you to write, right? So number 1, you identify the point. Number 2, you link it to that study. Link it to the study. Link it to study. Number 3, how does that particular, number 3, how does that particular identified point affect the overall credibility of the study, or what impact does that identified point have on your study? So number three, you write down how it impacts or affects the credibility of the study. For instance, if I stick on to the example that I gave you last, where we spoke about quantitative data being used in this study. So you write down this study had quantitative data being used, which is a strength. Now you write down at what particular points was quantitative data used in this study, right? So if we talk about this study in particular, there was quantitative data gathered in terms of the behavioral responses that were received. You might as well write down a quantitative an example of quantitative data, mention some number. So linking it to the study means you linking that particular identified point, with that particular part of the study that you're referring to, right? And the third point is you write down how it affects or impacts the credibility of the study, where you write, let's just say, usage of quantitative data would eventually help would eventually help with replication and reliability, the chance of reliability increasing. So this is the same procedure that you'd use for all four of the points. You identify the point first, then you link it to the study, and then you write down how it impacts the credibility. Now, taking this ahead, and let's talk about the evaluative points for this study by Fagen. So if we have a look at this evaluation of the course study by Fagen et al. In 2014. So the general, we talk in terms of the general evaluative points, and then we'd relate them to Fagen et al. So general or a generic evaluative point could be the coding system used in the structured observation via behavioral checklist allows create collection of objective quantitative data, which can then be analyzed statistically. So you could say that you could say that there was, I mean, if we see this as an advantage, right, the using of the coding system, that was the mechanism of coding through structured observation. Now, for you to be able to understand this, you need to know the study well. If you know this study, you'd understand it all. If you do not know the study, there's this video available that you could watch and understand the study first, so that these evaluative points make sense to you. Now, moving on towards relating this particular strength to Fagan et al., right? Now, what many students do is they'd simply write this. Let's just say there's someone who simply writes this as a strength. Is this a strength? Oh, yes, it is a strength. But how do you show the examiner that this is a strength that you're referring to totally in relation with Fagan? Remember, you're asked to evaluate the study by Fagan et al., right? And you have been asked to evaluate it in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So I'm not saying this is not a strength. This is a strength, but this is a very generic strength, right? Now, this could be a strength for any other study as well. For you to link it to Fagan, that is the second point that I'd written down, where I'd mentioned link it to the study. This is what I'm referring to. So if there's a coding system that is there through which you can collect objective quantitative data, based on which you could have amazing analysis of through statistics. Direct comparisons could be made why the number of offers need to pass a performance test to assess how difficult a task was. So an advantage over here is direct comparisons could be made. You could do this because you had quantitative data, right? Now, for example, the task for trunk here needed an average of around 300 offers, while total HFUBB, that stands for here fluid up bucket and blow, needed an average of 110. So this is the point that you used. This is the linking part, the first part, the second part. The third part, how does this affect the credibility? So this direct comparison could help you with making reliability, the chance of reliability to grow, right? Now, moving on to the second strength, standardization of procedures of a study allows others researchers to replicate the study and test it for reliability. Moving on, Fagan et al. Had a standardized procedure, including the behavioral checklist and definitions for things such as trunkia plus the SPR training regime. This means another researcher could easily replicate the study to test for reliability. Now, you could use this particular point like this. Fagan et al. Had a standardized, I'll pick up another color so that you're able to understand it better. So this is a complete point if you want to use this one. The yellow part is the identification part. This is the linking part. And this is how it impacts the maroon or the red highlight. This is how it impacts the overall credibility of the study. Moving on towards the weaknesses now. Measurement of measurement of outcome variables can be subjective and affected by the motivation of the observer and trainer if they're directly involved in the data collection. Now, to pass a test, now we're specifically linking it to the study. To pass a test, the behavioral response needed to be of sufficient quality of function in a trunk wash, which was subjectively determined by the trainer. So this is a disadvantage, being subjectively determined by the trainer. I'll just underline this part. Yeah, let me clear out. So the trainer could not have been using the exact same criteria for every single behavioral response made by all elephants. There was no checking of these, nor were the sessions recorded to ensure some form of inter-observer reliability and a check on validity. So how does this eventually affect? This could be the third point used over here. So the point identified, the link to the study, and this eventually decreases chances of inter-observer reliability, and this could many people could question the validity of the research as well because there was subjectivity involved, right? Now taking this quickly ahead, another weakness, it is unlikely to gain a wide variety of participants to allow for generalization as the study used opportunity sample. So the usage of opportunity sample is being seen as a disadvantage over here. This is the point identified. Okay. Now, the 4 juvenile and 1 older adult elephants were chosen from those who happened to be available for the training at one of the elephant center in Nepal. All were females. Therefore, it may be difficult to generalize the success to male elephants or age groups older than juveniles, as there may be something unique about the 4 female elephants who passed the full trunk wash. In addition, it may be difficult to generalize to African elephants. These were not represented in the sample. All of these elephants, they were from Nepal. So I just generally tried explaining you how you could put the strengths and weaknesses or the evaluative points to use when you end up getting a 10-mark question. However, there have been certain other evaluative points as well. Ethics, as well as aspects of study already described below in ethical consideration that we've discussed earlier as well. There's just another video that I've put on this. The elephants were able to graze in the jungle. This is a good thing, with the manhouse from about 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the husbandry conditions were not altered, which is again a strength. This is a strength too. For the remainder of the day and during the night, each elephant was leg chained, post in an open stall. These were usually placed on both legs. The chains were between 6 and 8 feet long and was slack enough to allow easy movement around the post. This again could be an advantage over here. The elephant's diet was mainly fresh grass and dana, which is again an advantage. The elephants had access to water, but this was only when they were grazing and not when they were indoors. The elephants were housed in their usual place. Rewards such as bananas were used in addition to the usual diet, so they were not food deprived in such a way as to make the bananas very desirable. Distractions, yes, there were distractions. This could be a flaw. Distractions during training. The researchers noted that a range of distractions at different times during the training and testing. These included other animals in the jungle surrounding the elephants, tourists taking photographs, and so other animals in the jungle surrounding the elephants, tourists taking photographs, and that afternoon sessions were quite close to the usual feeding time. These may have affected the validity of findings, as it may have taken some elephants longer to master a behavioral response. Now, another thing that I'd like to add up over here, when you asked to write down 2 strengths and 2 limitations, if you want to use ethical issues as one of the strengths or weaknesses, it's on your discretion. You can use them, but be mindful that you're not using it in more than one point. So if you cannot say, oh, this was an ethical advantage, an ethical guideline that was followed, you put an ethical advantage and then you put an ethical disadvantage. To not do that, right? If you want to use ethics, either use it for strengths or weaknesses. In and in a simple manner, what I'm trying to say is, do not try to gain marks from the examiner by mentioning ethical guidelines more than once, right? So you can write it. It is a valid point. It could be a valid strength or limitation, but you could use it in a single manner, right? It could either be a strength or a weakness, and yeah, do not use it for more than once, or more do not use it more than once. For this particular question, how much time do we need for this? Simple calculation, our paper is of 90 marks, and we get 60 marks, and we get 90 minutes to do this. That is an hour and 30 minutes. I would want, and according to that calculation, you get 1.5 minutes per mark. That means if you have a 2-mark question, you shouldn't spend more than 3 minutes. If you have a 5-mark question, you shouldn't spend more than 7.5 minutes. And if there's a 10-mark question, you shouldn't spend anything more than 15 minutes on this, right? Now, when to do this question, I usually, because this is the last question, many students end up doing it towards the end, which is totally okay. Just be mindful that you have 15 minutes left, at least 15 minutes left, to be able to do this question. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. Take good care of yourself. Stay amazing. Allah Hafiz.